Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harrison. Each week, I'm joined by husky, hairy, huggable homos who love film to dish up a little bit of movie news when we have time, as well as review a film, either current or classic. I say if we have time because this week we are doing a double feature. More on that here in just a second. But first, let me introduce you to my fantastic partners in crime, one of whom is also my partner in life, Jim Pugliafico. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, babe, and welcome to the podcast, everyone.
And Will Lindis is here with us as well. Welcome, Will.
Hey there. Welcome back, listeners. So excited to talk movies with you all today.
Indeed. And talk movies we shall. We're going to be reviewing two films. The Mummy, the new Dark Universe kickoff film starring Tom Cruise, as well as It Comes at Night, the new thriller horror movie starring Joel Edgerton. So a lot to discuss this week. But before we dive into that too much and get things rocking and rolling, just a couple of housekeeping items. One, if you are watching us live, don't forget to hop into the live chat, drop us a note, say hello, let us know your thoughts on whatever it is we're jabbering on about. And, if it's appropriate for a YouTube audience, we may give you a shout out on air. And then second, it's been a little while since we have done a Movie Bears of the Week. We've just had a lot on our radar, a lot to talk about and to discuss. But, it's June, and June means it's Pride Month, guys. So how do we feel about Movie Bears of the Month special Pride edition?
I love this. I love that, obviously this is an important month for all of us in our community. So this is a chance for all of you to celebrate with all three of us. And I'm looking forward to seeing what everyone's definition of pride is. Are people going to be sending in pictures of them with rainbow flags and stuff, or bear flags, or spending time with their partners? Also, there's all sorts of different creative ways that people can showcase pride. And I'm looking forward to seeing every single one of them.
Yeah, I think it's time we bring this back. It's been way too long, and now would be the perfect time with it being Pride Month. And, we should have a bunch of guys ready to go and send us their pictures of, whatever Pride means to them or whatever pictures they want to send us and say hi. We'll definitely feature some on here.
I'm ready to see all of these guys who are ready to go.
Oh, man, for sure. And the less clothing they have on, the better in my book. But, send us whatever you like. I mean, it could be a picture of you and your partner getting married. It could be you you hanging out with your group of buds at a pride parade. It could be you showing off your rainbow Apple Watch band. Whatever pride means to you, send us some pictures. We're going to put a post on Facebook asking for submissions. So be on the lookout for that. You can also send your special pride pictures to Brad at moviebearspodcast.com, and I'll be happy to funnel those submissions in so that we can get ready to rock and roll for next week. I also want to give a quick hello and shout out to some folks who are joining us in the live chat right now. We've got our good friend Sam from Denver. Hey, Sam, glad to have you along. Ben Stark. I will refrain from making a Game of Thrones joke because everyone probably does that. But Ben, it's been a long time. We love you. We adore you. Glad to see you. Welcome, guys. Glad to have you here.
We curve you with both hands.
We curve you indeed. We heart you guys so much. We've got total hearts on for you.
We do. That's pretty true, actually. In any event, guys, we have a lot to get to this week. Jim and Will, are you ready for some movie discussion? Are we good?
Oh, I am.
Yeah.
All right. Well, for anyone who may be joining us for the first time, either listening live or joining us via iTunes, Stitcher Radio, watching on YouTube later on, we like to talk about movies spoiler free for a little while before we dive into our full reviews. So what that means is if you've not yet seen The Mummy or It Comes at Night, we're going to give you our initial impressions. whether we think you should see the film, whether it's worth your time and money, and we'll give you all of that without spoiling any salient plot points. And then, of course, we'll give you a fair warning before we take you to Spoiler Town. But all of that said, we're going to go ahead and kick things off with our discussion of The Mummy. All right, so Jim, do us a favor, kick us off here. Give us a little bit of setup for the film. Tell us sort of your initial thoughts. Should people check it out in theaters, maybe rent it, stream it, or skip it? What do you think?
Well, before I get to all that, I'm going to start at the beginning. So this is The Mummy is a reboot movie. It's a reboot of the long-running Mummy franchise, which actually started like back in 1930 something with the Boris Karloffs and Lon Chaney's, that era, the black and white era. And actually, this is before this movie rebooted it. There have been actually 3 separate franchises about the Mummy, 3 movie franchises, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. And all of them had like multiple movies in them. So when this, was announced as part, it's going to be the first movie in what Universal Studios is calling the Dark Universe. Ooh. And if you don't know that by now, you weren't paying attention at the beginning of the movie when right after Universal comes up, Dark Universe comes out. And that's with, it's kind of their monster universe to feature, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, the Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula, Van Halen. Oh, wait, that's Van Helsing.
Easy mistake, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I always mix those two up.
I do too. I know way more about Van Halen than I do about Van Helsing. So, but I know Mike Lovins probably got excited when we said Van Halen. I'm sure
he's all like, "I'm gonna kill some monsters right now."
Yeah.
I would watch the fuck out of that movie. Like, that sounds awesome.
Van Halen versus Van Helsing.
It'd be sort of like Kiss Saves Christmas, but with Van Halen and Dark Universe monsters.
Yeah. Anyway, this one, The Mummy, stars Tom Cruise, Russell Crowe, Sophia Boutella, and Annabelle Wallis, and a bunch of other people. It's directed by Alex Kurtzman, who's got another movie under his filmography, but he's been more of a writer, producer kind of up to this point, as opposed to director. My reaction to this movie was that, like, I do like the monster universe premise. I grew up on some of the movies. Now, I wasn't born back in 1932, but I did catch at least the tail end of the second Mummy franchise and some of the 90s Mummy franchise that'll probably come up again. There's nothing wrong with this idea. I think it's just going to come down to execution, which in this movie, unfortunately, is kind of a good news, bad news situation, and we'll have to see which side wins out. I think there were some good things in this movie. I think there were some pretty kind of bad things in this movie. And so it was really uneven for me. The first half I thought was pretty decently executed. Even though for me, I mean, we would typically knock a movie down for this. There was a lot of exposition in this movie at the beginning. Voiceover kind of narration. Oh, back in ancient times, Queen so-and-so had to do this and do that. But I still liked the setup, and I liked the origin story of the villain for this movie. I thought it was really good. About the first act, I thought was pretty good. I thought there were some decent horror film-like moments in this. Action set pieces I thought were pretty good in this movie. So it was a pretty thrilling first act for me. Beyond that, and then once the plot really got going, is kind of where it kind of fell off significantly for me. Tom Cruise was perfectly fine at his Tom Cruisey best in this. He does what he does. You got to say, he brings it to pretty much every movie he's in. So, you can't really fault him for this movie. I think what you're going to point back at here is a bad plot, some bad screenwriting in the plot. I liked the scenery chewing that Sofia Boutella did in this movie.
Mm.
I thought she really sunk her teeth into it. Everything looked fine. Special effects. We saw it in only 2D. We didn't see it in 3D. I wonder though if the 3D in this made it really dark in some scenes. But that's why I kind of stay away from 3D. But 2D looked fine to me. I thought the special effects, especially the creature effects, I thought were pretty darn good. Otherwise, I'll just say, did I hate it and think it was total garbage? No, not at all. I got some entertainment out of it. But I'm not really going to remember much about this movie when the next Dark Universe film comes along, right? I don't know. I hope there's not a lot of continuation because I'm not going to remember a lot from this movie. For me, this falls on the side of a soft pass for this movie. Unless you, your husband, or your mom is a huge Tom Cruise fan, I would say, or you just want to say you were there when the Dark Universe got its rocky start. I would say you may want to wait for this one on VOD or rental. I think I'd save your movie money on this.
All right. So soft pass from Jim. Will, how do you feel?
It's interesting that this has been repositioned as the first film in the Dark Universe franchise because this wasn't originally the first film. We reviewed the first film a couple years ago with Dracula Untold, but that one didn't do super well, and so they've downplayed those elements to turn this one into the new,
they got to do
first franchise. And I'm wondering if they're going to be downplaying some elements of this one for those same reasons. This one's getting absolutely pilloried in the critical press, and while I think maybe some of that is unfair, I do fall more on the lines of this is mostly kind of a garbage movie for me. So this is a hard pass. Now, it's not all bad. I think Sofia Boutella here is really, really compelling. And there's a spot where it does like a flashback to tell her origin story. I thought that was kind of cool. I thought that was actually really cool. And when she gets to do her like really hamming up to the camera stuff, it's like what I think the Shakira villain in Suicide Squad was aiming for. I feel like they executed it excellently here. I love the Sofia Boutella character. Unfortunately, that's the only thing I really enjoyed here. I think that Tom Cruise, I'm not going to knock him at all for this. He is an absolutely charismatic guy who can carry he's carried a lot of bad movies in the past. I feel like the script didn't give him a chance to really be his to put his true talents to use. This is a charismatic guy who played an absolute unredeeming scumbag here. And we didn't get as much of that kind of like wink, wink, charm nod thing that Tom Cruise does so well. I also feel like, and Jim, you hit the nail on the head. The script here is just, it is the real villain. Like if there's one thing that's like, if there's one looming threat of the Dark Universe, it's whoever wrote this script, specifically the franchise building stuff. I think that, the obvious comparison is to something like a Marvel, because they're the ones that got the franchise ball rolling that everybody else seems to be chasing. But whether you like the way they handle that now or not, that first series of Marvel movies was so light on the world building stuff. They would put a little stinger at the end of a movie to kind of link you to the next one and build and build and build. Here, it's like they're playing catch up. They want to get this whole Dark Universe thing going so much that the movie stops at one point and spends this long sequence introducing you to stuff that will pay off later on. And it's completely discordant. It takes the wind right out of this film sails. Russell Crowe does not. He's fine here, but his character is obviously supposed to be a bigger part of this franchise. And oh boy, I'm really worried about kind of where these next films are going based on what I saw here. This was a hard pass for me. I think that if you want something. If you're looking for something with some good action sequences, I think there are some of those here. They're not perfect. I think they fall into ragdoll physics a little bit more than I would have liked for this particular type of story. But the action sequences were fine. Sofia Boutella is good enough. But aside from that, this is just a really hard one to recommend. So I guess buyer beware.
Right. So soft pass and a hard pass. So we've had soft, we've had hard. I guess I'm gonna go with a semi pass. Haha, I've got a semi. I don't know,
solid
guys.
pass.
This movie wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. So I mean, it's in this weird like in between sort of limbo. I mean, I wouldn't spend money to go see this at a theater unless you absolutely have nothing else to do. You've already seen Wonder Woman. There's nothing else you want to see, and you're just in the mood for like big, loud, bombastic, screeching mummy monster, whatever. And I mean that can be fun. But this movie just unfortunately didn't do a lot for me. I've actually come quite a ways around on Tom Cruise the last few years, and that's probably an unpopular thing to say. A lot of people really just don't care for Tom Cruise. I used to be one of them, but believe it or not, the Jack Reacher movies, as well as was it retitled Live, Die, Repeat, or is it Oblivion?
Edging Till Tomorrow.
There was Oblivion. And then there was Edging Until Tomorrow, or Edge of whatever you
started off as Edge of Tomorrow, and then it's Live, Die, Repeat. Now I think it's Live, Die, Repeat, The Edge of Tomorrow.
Wow, that's fucking stupid. Anyway, so those last few movies that I've seen him in, I've actually kind of dug. I like the new Mission Impossible. So going into this film, I'm like, hey, Tom Cruise, sure, I'll give it a chance. I don't know. I like that they're trying to start up this whole Dark Universe franchise. I think we could potentially get some cool stuff, but I think they need to go back to some of the like monster movie roots and kind of, I don't know, ham it up even more a little bit. I almost think these movies need to be more tongue-in-cheek than serious in a way. I don't know. Maybe you disagree with that, Jim, given your face and like the horse whinnying noises you're making.
I'm thinking of some things from this movie, and we're going to talk about them in spoilers.
All right. Well, anyway, I think this movie doesn't exactly have a beat on the tone that it's trying to set for this whole universe, and I think it suffers as a result. I'm a big fan of world building, but like this movie either had too little world building or too much world building. I can't decide, and that's a weird place for me to be in. And I think that the main story of the film sort of takes a back seat to it at some points, and it's like, wait a second, can I please have the movie back that like I bought a ticket for? Also, the whole like setup at the end. You know, we'll talk more about that in spoilers, but it's just it's a little weird for me. You guys mentioned Russell Crowe. I'm a big fan of Russell Crowe. But has Russell Crowe gotten fat? Did he like gain 85 pounds for this movie?
He was a little chubbier in this one. And he also was in what was that Shane Black movie he did last year? The Nice Guys? Like he wasn't quite as bulked up there, but you got to see some of that daddy bear goodness on him. And I could have just watched a still frame of him instead of the rest of this movie and been good.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you know, I've always thought he was a very ruggedly handsome man. I lusted after him in Gladiator when he was much trimmer and more athletic. I lusted after him in this movie as sort of like the chubby daddy body sort of Russell Crowe. I just wish that the character he was playing wasn't so, I don't know. Jim, that may be where you're going with your comment earlier. It was just really distracting for me. It wasn't like Russell Crowe singing in Les Mis distracting for me, but it didn't work. And, you know, his character is supposed to be sort of like a linchpinny character, I think, that chains a lot of these films that are going to be coming out together. And unfortunately, I mean, I don't see this franchise, unfortunately, like resting on his Nick Fury wannabe shoulders. So definitely this is a semi-pass for me. This is maybe one that you might rent, stream on iTunes or something, watch at home, maybe save it for Halloween, guys. Like it could be like a cool Halloween-y kind of movie. I don't know. But I wouldn't waste your money in theaters, but that's just me.
I really like something you said there, Brad, about, and it was the thing that you and Jim sort of like, I could tell that you guys had divergent thoughts on it. And I feel like in some ways you're both kind of right on that. And what I mean by that is I feel like this movie needed to pick a tone, and I don't care what that tone is. If it could have gone more satirical and tongue-in-cheek, and if it had veered into that, I think with a clever enough script, because that only works if you're writing it super sharp, it could have been a really interesting way to go. Or you could have stripped out a lot of the blockbustery stuff and made it a little bit more of a horror, maybe more of a classic horror, maybe more of a, I don't want to say character study, because that sounds a lot drier than it could be, but you know, you could have gone a couple of different routes with this, and instead this is a film that almost picked the broadest, thinnest tone possible. Like, we want to appeal to everybody, and in spreading itself so thin, I feel like they've actually appealed to nobody.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to bring up, I mean, you talk about that divergent tone. There were parts of the movie where I was absolutely distracted by kind of like a sharp left turn in the script and in the tone, especially with the character early on. I don't remember the character's name, but it was Tom Cruise's kind of buddy in the film, and he gets some lines in the movie that are meant to be, I think, like comic relief almost. He's kind of like this. Yeah. He's kind of like, he ends up being kind of like this silly character. And it was weird because it was part of the movie where it was at a part of the movie where I'm like, this is really freaky. And I'm starting, you know, I was enjoying the horror movie vibe of this thing and the adventure and stuff. And then they're throwing in these like little gags. And I'm like, what the fuck are they doing? It just didn't, it's probably some studio exec said, hey, man, you got to lighten this movie up. You need to throw some jokes in here. And that's exactly what they did. They just threw some jokes in, and it just didn't feel organic to the movie at all. And for me, it was distracting. Maybe there's a way they could have done it, you know, and made the tone lighter, but they certainly, it didn't work for me.
I'm suddenly having, sorry, well, I'm suddenly like having this thought in my head of this movie reimagined, like that movie from the 80s, My Best Friend is a Vampire, except it's My Best Friend is a Mummy. And it's totally like a buddy comedy where like, you know, like that could totally work. I'd be all over that. That would be fun.
Yeah, there's a great comment here in chat. JP says, part of the reason I like the Brendan Fraser Mummy films is that they embrace the inherent campy aspects of the film series from the 30s. And I agree, that's a really good way they could have gone. The reason that Mummy series was, I felt stronger and more fun to watch, was because it knew what it was trying to be. This film, like you mentioned, Jim, it would start down a road and then it would lighten itself up. Like you've got a comic relief character who pops up randomly to throw out not funny one-liners. Like, that is the worst way to do this, but it's very possible to do camp well. You could also do something like, and granted, like this was a very meta film, so this exact template wouldn't work. But if you think about something like Cabin in the Woods, which is a film that was a really dark horror. It was a really dark horror film, but it was also a really sharp satirical comedy, and it was able to balance those tones a lot more strongly because it knew what it was trying to be. And I think that's again, like, if I boiled this film for me, if I was doing a star rating, it's like a 1.5, and literally 3 of those 3.5 stars that I knocked off were just because of the crappy script. Like, it's that poorly executed.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, guys, I don't want to spend a ton of time. I don't know that we need to spend a ton of time in spoilers, but I think there are at least a few things to talk about. Are you both on board with taking the wraps off the spoiler section?
Take them off.
I like that one. Good job, Brad.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So spoilers for The Mummy are officially fair game. I will heretofore awkwardly ramble to give you time to step away if you need to, mute your volume for 5 or 10 minutes and then come back for It Comes at Night. But we are going to go ahead and dive right into spoilers. And I want to just bring up one point real quick. I was surprised that for a movie called The Mummy, we really didn't see like a mummy with like mummy wraps on very much. It's like they found every excuse to not have a monster that looks like a mummy. Like the Aminette character, she just sucks the life out of people and then like returns to looking like a you know, Shakira like witch or something. Like, you know, it's very, the wrappings are very, very thin. Like, I don't know. Am I alone in that sort of bugging me that it didn't look like a mummy?
I got enough. Sorry, Will.
Go.
I got enough of the mummy. I mean, I got enough of the mummy with the, you know, the sarcophagus and, you know, the tomb, and she comes out and she is wrapped, and, you know, everywhere she's gone, there's this like trail of ace bandage or whatever the fuck it was, like on the ground. I got enough of that. And I'm sure we'll talk about the ending to this movie. I really dug the villain in this movie. I was kind of sad to see them. I don't even really remember. This is sad, but I don't even really remember how they dispatched the villain in this movie, or if they really even did effectively. You might have to remind me, because I was into her. Like, I wanted her to succeed more than it.
She was the most likable character in the movie. And that's
There's a great comment in chat. I'm sorry. Again from JP, who says the wrappings thing, they were almost like a sexy mummy costume you'd see at Party City.
And that's fair. I mean, for me personally, I didn't mind the design of the mummy, like, because I felt like that it at least had a direction, it had a style, it knew what it was trying to do. Like, it was a focused makeup and art job, and it was one of the most focused things in this film for me. So it was one of those things where maybe if this was a more solid film, I could double back around and want to see some more classic mumminess. One thing that did bug me a little bit, not bug me, that's not the right word, but one thing that did kind of weird me out as I was thinking about this on the drive home, is her story arc in this movie, The Mummies, is not terribly unlike Rita Repulsa's in the Power Ranger movie from earlier this year. They've come back after a bunch of years, and then they suck people dry until they slowly become their hotter version and show down with the heroes at the end. Like, I thought that was, I just kept thinking, just like, any minute now, the Zords are going to come out and take out the mummy. But yeah, nice. I like the design, like the facial makeup, like the little like tattoo scar things, I think make for a really impressive look. Like, it's telling that when you see most of the movie art for this, like, you do see a little bit of Tom Cruise in some of them, but it's mostly like that excellent design for Sofia Boutella. And I think that's because it's like the one thing that they can easily showcase and say, see, we're not completely bad. I'm not hearing Jim. I see. Yeah, I see him talking, but I can't hear him talking.
I don't know what's going on there. I don't know. All right. It looks like Jim is troubleshooting.
Shall we? We can.
The joys of doing it live.
We can wrap. Yeah, we can rap maybe about some other aspects of this and give him a moment to do that. Were there any things? I mean, I feel like I've been particularly negative about this film, and I hate doing that because it's not like.
Let's hang, just because it's going to be really awkward to edit if we add new material and then he has to go back. So if it's okay with you, if we can hold off on that for just a second.
Oh, sure.
Babe, try it again. No, we still can't hear you. Gosh. Yeah, just drop and come back, babe. See if that works. All right. Let's see if he can come back in and pick up where he left off. It's the mummy's curse, Will. That's what's happened here.
It's not the worst thing that can happen involving this movie. We could have to watch it again.
Try it again.
Back.
Hey, welcome back.
All right. Welcome back. All right. Go ahead and take it back to the beginning of your comment, if you don't mind, babe.
Yeah, I mean, I liked her character. I know they kind of fell in love with. Well, first of all, as far as the wrappings go, I mean, you take a beautiful woman, put her in a movie as a villain, you're probably not going to keep her under wraps. I mean, it's just a hard thing to, it's just going to be a harder sell. Because like it or not, I mean, part of her being the villain is her sexiness. and part of the character is her sexiness, and to keep her under wraps the whole time probably would have worked even less effectively than what we got. But they did like their backlit, like from a distance shots of the villain, like in the woods or in the church. Like I think every setting had that one scene of her like standing there looking menacing, backlit, coming at the character. It was effective the first couple times, but then it got a little old.
Yeah, again, it's like the film didn't have too many tricks to fall back on, so it kept falling back on its greatest hits, and it really only had one greatest hit. So it became like, like when you go to a concert for that one hit wonder band, and like all they do is play that one song, and then the audience shuffles out afterwards. I've literally seen that happen. That's kind of what this felt like. Yeah. It just felt like it felt like they lost themselves in this movie. It sucks because I want to see a better franchise for these monsters. I love classic creatures. I love the idea here. I think that with a really, really solid film runner, like a guy whose job is to unite all of these films, like one unified voice, someone whose job is to get these things on track, with some sort of through line, but let each of the individual stories shine. This could have been so freaking cool, but they're already like 0 for 2. I don't know how they right the ship at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously trying for this connection, right, with the end of this movie. At this point, this is my take. I don't know. I put something on Facebook, Will. I think you and I were in agreement. But the movie really leaves, I mean, we're in spoilers, really leaves Tom Cruise having, like, embraced the demons, Satan, or the evil god Set. Basically, he embraces it, lets it inside of him. He becomes the mummy. Like he has the mummy powers, but now he's like out in the desert, having resurrected his former girlfriend, and having resurrected his former best friend, and he's out there hunting for other monsters or whatever, I guess. And the Russell Crowe character is like, he's not the movie creature we deserve, but he's the movie creature we want, whatever he says. Like, it's obviously meant like, oh, it takes a monster to fight a monster. Maybe we can call on his help at some point. So, that whatever, movies are coming down the pipeline, right? It's going to be like this Avengers-esque thing where it's like, oh, we're going to have to unite the Mummy and Dracula and the creature from the Black Lagoon and Wolfman to fight some evil, crazy, whatever.
Maybe, and I would be on board with this if this was the case. Maybe this is just the long game to getting us to a new Monster Squad movie.
That's what I'm hoping.
If that was the case, I would sit through like 5 to 10 more of these pieces of shit if it got me a new Monster Squad movie. I know you posted something on your wall, Brad, and it sort of baffled me because, and you and I were in total agreement on it.
Yeah.
Just like that, there are some people that maybe thinking that we're in spoilers, that maybe it's like Van Helsing with a twist or something like that. For me, I felt like the end of the movie was fairly straightforward. With like Tom Cruise has these mummy powers and even rides off with like the sand trailing behind him, mummy wise, I feel like the problem with the movie for me wasn't that it was ambiguous in its ending, because I think it was very clear to me. He was the mummy. He has mummy powers. He's controlling life and death. Easy. But it was confusing for me how they got there, because like with you have this dagger, and if she stabs him with it, he'll get injected with Set and then like become this awful monster. But when he stabs himself with it, which isn't really set up, he just kind of does it. Like, it turns him into a good mummy. I think that I think people were grasping for something so desperately at that point that like I can see where people would be confused with why the film just decided like, oh fuck it, we got to write ourselves out of this box.
It didn't really come together in a strong way. I mean, when you think mummy, you think of some person that's been dead, for a long time. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think he ever died in this movie, did he?
Maybe you could say when he gets... Yeah, he died... I guess he died twice. You can kind of say.
Live,
Right.
die, repeat.
Yeah,
As a
right?
mummy.
See?
It's part of the franchise. There we go. Fixed.
Yeah, I mean, the first time, right, is on the plane, right? The plane crashes, and then he wakes
That's
up in
true.
a body bag, you know, in the morgue.
Well, right. He didn't. Yeah. I mean, he didn't get a scratch or whatever. I guess that's because he's the chosen one.
And you can say there was a scene where, and I don't think they did a good job of this, but I think what they were trying to show, there's a scene where she just manhandles him, and she keeps doing these things like where she knocks him down and he hits his neck on a step. And that looked like for anyone else that would obviously like snap his neck and kill him, but he gets right back up and keeps fighting. And
Right.
like I feel like that scene was to show us, like she could have killed him like 4 or 5 times in this scene, but she couldn't
Right.
because of whatever the power is. So I mean, I think that there's totally that. I feel like maybe it would have been cooler. Like, walk with me on this one a little bit. What if instead of just showing him not take a scratch, what if it showed him like his neck snap, or it showed him just like whatever, like obviously dead, and whatever they have to do to make this the, you know, the rating that it is, what have you. But like, and then you see him like kind of get back up and like, I don't know, re-knit or just keep going or something like that. Let us see the damage done. I don't know that that saves the movie, but I mean, it does make him less of like a Superman character and more of like a, I don't know.
I like that thought, and here's why. I think it would have been so much cooler if like through the course of the movie, after having like come back to life, he figures out like by himself that this curse or whatever, by her making him the chosen one, has like given him the same powers. Like he sort of learns to call on them on his own, and he uses them to like fight and defeat her, and then like becomes the hero or whatever. That to me, you know, like the twin joined curse thing would be way better than the whole like, I'm going to stab myself with the magic MacGuffin dagger. And I don't know. I would have worked better.
What if he keeps some of the wounds? Like he comes back to life, but he still looks a little off. And so at the end of the movie, when he embraces his mumminess, instead of just, oh, I'm going to put like a cowl over my face because I'm, you know, I'm a superhero in the desert now. What if instead he actually had just, like he doesn't have to be head to toe, but he had a few bandages on him to imply or to remind us of the mummy aesthetic without it having to be a direct like wrapping. To your point before, Brad, about you wanted to see more wrapped mummies, you could probably do that by just having Tom Cruise not look like a pretty boy at the end of this movie. Although then I guess that defeats the point of having Tom Cruise.
Yes, I guess. Well, guys, we have another movie to talk about, believe it or not. And you know, we're I don't know, we've spent more time on the Mummy than I actually thought we would, but it's good discussion. It's been great. But how do you guys feel about changing gears and moving on? Are we ready?
I'm ready.
Let's move.
All right. I know Ben Stark has very patiently been waiting for this moment. So Ben, we appreciate your patience. Now begins our discussion of It Comes at Night. All right, so Will, same as before, give us a little bit of setup for this film, and is this one that you would recommend people see theaters, rent, or skip?
Absolutely. So let's do this in movie voice, just because it's fun to do. So straight from IMDb. Secure within a desolate home as an unnatural threat terrorizes the world, a man has established a tenuous domestic order with his wife and son, but this will soon be put to the test when a desperate young family arrives seeking refuge. So this is the latest film by A24, which is I think right now it's not unfair to say they are one of the best production studios out there. In addition to several movies that we've talked about on this very favorably, they were the studio that gave us Moonlight from last year. So I mean, that in and of itself is a lot of pedigree. But I find myself really drawn to the aesthetics from this particular company. So I guess there's really two ways to talk about this movie. For me, first of all, I want to say that this is one of my favorite films of the year for a lot of reasons. It is a very challenging and subtle film that really plays into this atmospheric darkness that gets more under your skin than it does, like, you know, directly terrify you. It focuses more on like paranoia than it does gore. It focuses on tension more than it does like jump scares. And this is all while, and this is, you know, based on the description, this is all while kind of subverting the kind of the familiar dystopian trope, because instead of having the one, a lot of times you see these like kind of the one survival guy alpha whose job it is to protect his family. You've got two of them, and they're kind of set at odds with each other because they both have different goals. They have different focuses. So this is for me, and the type of aesthetic that I like, this is a damn near perfect film. That said, one of the big problems I do have with this movie is that I think that it was not marketed correctly. This is the type of film that is absolutely not for everyone. This is a very niche film that has a very limited targeted audience. And that's fine. I don't think that all films have to be for all people. Just look at The Mummy. That's a film that tried to be for everybody, and in doing so was panned for being for nobody. This was a film that I think if it had focused its marketing more, I think that it would have been one of those smaller darlings that the people that gravitate towards that type of film would absolutely rave about. Instead, the marketing made it try to appeal to more of a mass market, and that's not what this film is. This is not a film for everybody. So, I don't say that and I don't say that with derision either. Not all films are for all people. Some films are much narrower in scope. This one marketed itself as more than it was, and that is a problem, and that's part of why it's getting some negative feedback. All of that aside, though, we have a set of really solid performances. Joel Edgerton is pretty much pitch perfect in this, as he is in a lot of things. Like, the dude is on a hot streak right now. You also have a great performance by a dude named Christopher Abbott, who really blew me away with what he gave us here. This is a guy who, like, he's done some stuff on like Girls and a few other things, but I don't think he's really become a name, and I don't think he's going to become a name after this, but I am more interested in seeing more that comes from him. Finally, this is by director Trey Edward Schultz, who gave us another really, really solid film kind of beginning parts of last year, called Krisha, which is another one of those like films that nobody saw, but those who did like absolutely adored it. It focused on its lane and it marketed to that lane, and that's what this one should have done as well. So yes, this is a great movie. If you like the same type of movies that I do, like if when you listen to this podcast you hear like the things that I say and you kind of agree kind of with, like, I think that you'll have a good time with this film. But again, I'm not going to do a mass like recommend for this movie because this isn't a movie for everybody. I don't know if where that falls in the hard recommend, soft recommend. I don't know where that falls in that category.
Hard to recommend.
If you have a certain aesthetic, it is one of the strongest recommends I can give. Otherwise, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Fair enough, Will.
All right. So I would say it's safe to say it's a recommend of some quality of hardness.
Yeah.
Well, somewhere in there.
Yeah. It's a recommend with an asterisk.
Okay. All right. So we've got a recommend from Will. I'm going to say this movie is a big steaming pile of meh boring shitdom for me. And I know, that's very opposite to your opinion, Will. I feel that way for a few reasons. One, yes, the marketing thing, it's totally a fake out. It's sort of marketed as like this supernatural, like monster feature thing. And what we really get is, and I'll wait for spoilers, but it's more like Z for Zachariah meets The Walking Dead than it is like some kind of like crazy supernatural, like, monster thing. And so, obviously the expectations are very different coming into this movie than what this movie actually gives you. That said, I tried to set that aside and just sort of judge this movie based on what it actually is and not what the marketers, tried to pull to get you to come to see this movie. And I'll be honest, as much as I like Joel Edgerton, I found his version of Rick Grimes kind of boring. You guys talked about you talked about the tension between them and, with what was going on. I found the whole affair pretty forgettable. Maybe it's because I have Walking Dead fatigue or something, but I'm just so tired of watching people in a stressful situation, sitting around a fucking table, talking and mugging at each other. I don't know. It was just, I don't know. There just wasn't enough going on, not enough payoff for me. Yeah, I guess from a cinematic standpoint, it's shot beautifully. There's some cool shots. There's some cool things they do with color. I do like the whole red door at the end of the hallway thing. It's in the trailer, so I can mention it. They do a great job with characters approaching that door and what's going to happen. And oh my God. But I just think it takes such a, I don't know. It takes a great premise for me and just robs a lot of the excitement that it could have from it. So, Jim, I kind of know your opinion already, so I know I'm the lone dissenting voice here. Spoiler alert, sorry. But this movie wasn't great for me.
Wow. I get to be the middle guy this time. No, I actually like this movie. I definitely give it a recommend. Also a little bit with the asterisk, Will. I loved what this movie did. It was very confident in what it wanted to do and how it did it. The way it was scripted, the way it portrayed the tension throughout the story, I thought was great. The characterizations were fine. I think it did lack from. How do I say this without sounding like kind of an elitist asshole?
No,
but
go for it. We understand.
No, it's for most audiences, and even for me, even though I did appreciate the movie, I would have appreciated more if it had a stronger resolution, I guess, to the movie. Something that came at night. You know what I mean? I don't know. At the end of the movie, a lot of people, and I don't want to make spoilers yet.
We'll have to come. We can come back to
at the end of the movie. I mean, there were gasps in our audience, and I don't think there were gasps of oh my God, that was awesome. I think there were gasps of disappointment in a way for much of the audience. I don't think I had that because I kind of expected what we were going to get. I did appreciate how the movie did it. The witch definitely paid off in some of those ways, even though people hated that one too. This one, it's just like Krisha though, Will, which I did see. It's all about building tension, giving you. It's kind of it's the horror movie version of edging. You just you don't really get that release at the end. You're just kind of wound up and very tense. Man, some of the shots in this movie, some of the things that happen in this movie, kind of towards the middle, I mean, they're shocking. And Brad, you mentioned The Walking Dead, and a lot of people say, "Oh, this is The Walking Dead," blah blah blah. And yes and no. I mean, it's got some of the same story elements. It's got the isolation. It's got the well, again, I don't want to get spoilers, but we'll talk about it. But it wasn't. It was just, to me, some of those levers that The Walking Dead hits, this movie hit them a lot harder for me. I actually felt some of the things that went on in this movie. Oh my God, did that really happen? Did they really have to do that? That's awful. What happened in that scene. So anyway, it was a powerful movie. I give it a recommend. I can't wait to get into it more with you guys and spoilers.
All right. And boy, do we have a storm of discussion happening in the live chat right now. It is a little bit spoilery in the conversation, so just FYI. But you guys are doing a pretty good job of dancing around it. But I think it's just time to, just open the red spoiler door and let all the spoilers come rushing in. Are we good with that? Is it time? Are we set?
It is time.
Right. Jim, I will take your silence as an affirmation that you are good to go.
I am good to go. Sorry, I was chatting.
That's all right. That's all right. So, all right. Spoilers, officially fair game. Spoilers, blah, blah, blah. Listen at your own peril, blah, blah, blah. Step away for a sandwich, blah, blah, blah. Come back if you want. Okay, good. So where do you guys want to start?
I mean, the thing that Jim was dancing around that some people are kind of mentioning in chat, and the thing that I'm most interested in talking about is the ending, because I think starting there makes sense. So we're in spoilers. Okay, we're in spoilers.
Yep. Let it out.
What I liked about this ending, and also why I get that other people wouldn't, and that's okay. Again, like I'm very okay, like being alone on my island, or actually, Jim, you can join me on It Comes at Night Island. But I'm okay, like not being in the popular opinion on this one. I feel like this movie set up something from the beginning that it wasn't as much showing like a fractured set of relationships like you see sometimes. It wasn't as much showing what happens when people kind of butt heads. This was a film that was about, at least to me, this was a film that was about inevitability. Like from the moment that what is it? Will, yeah, Christopher Abbott's character Will. From the moment he showed up, this was going to be the end result, and it feels like to me Schultz was saying quite a bit about like the way human beings act towards one another in setting up a film that was on such a inevitable path. I think that's a really solid, and like Jim mentioned before, I think that's a very bold way to take this story. And it's something that, you know, I think there's the comparisons to The Walking Dead. I think the problem that I have with that as a comparison is I think that The Walking Dead doesn't always know what story it's trying to tell. Like I've gotten to the point where I hate watch that show. Like, and you know, it's like I keep waiting for them to like kind of pick up focus, and then every so often they do, and then they drop it, whatever. And it's because they're telling it over like 6-7 seasons. So I also like I get that that's a difference. This film knew exactly what it was saying and exactly how it was going to say it. And it did so. Like, I can't think of a movie this year. I'll have to look back over my list. I can't think of a movie this year where I did more damage to my fingernails in the theater. Like, I swear, like the tension was so, like, again, it wasn't like big tension. It was just that little subtle, just like kind of bothers you tension. Like I chewed the hell out of my nails. Like I did some damage. I got to fix these back up. So that was my take on the ending. I liked the ending. I liked the inevitability of it. And I like kind of like what it says about us as a people.
Yeah, I think at the end of the movie, you find out that really what there is some kind of plague going on, right? This isn't about zombie monsters, right? That people just get sick and they die. I mean, that's the only horror. And the horror of this movie is watching people around you go through that and trying to protect yourself from that happening. That's what this whole movie is about. And you know, the Sam in the chat mentioned something about a time jump in the first act. I'm not exactly sure which time jump he's talking about, except at one point the main character, I forget his name, goes out in his truck with the guy, you know, the Will character, and they run into some other dudes. They have to kill him, and then they have to go pick up his family. But they like jump over that part, like they totally jump over that part. And they're after the ambush, right? They're just driving back with Black Phillip in the back of the wagon, and
that's when we got the montage scene, right? The time jump was the montage thing. Right?
I don't think we even got a montage, did we?
Didn't we see them like leading the goat and then like farming and chopping wood, and like wasn't it like a series of like
but that was back at the house. I'm talking about right. Before they got back at the house, it was a whole chunk of time that was missing.
Okay.
Like how they got out of the woods, how they got to the guy's homestead, pick up his family. All of a sudden, boom, they're just showing up. And Will, you mentioned, you know, inevitability. I get it. It was inevitable that something bad was going to happen. We didn't know what was going to happen or how bad it would be. You could think that, hey, this guy Will is a nut and he's going to kill off all of the family and take over that house or whatever.
Beware of
that-
wills. Moral of the story.
Obvious.
I promise I'm not going to accidentally kill all of you when the apocalypse comes. I
Yeah,
promise.
yeah. But yeah, I think about slow burn horror movies. Will, you remember The Invitation?
Oh yeah, Karen Kasama.
Now that had a payoff. That was a slow burn and frustrating at times, but that had a payoff.
Fuck yeah, it did.
I won't get into spoilers, but like, I don't know. I think, like I said, if this movie lacked one thing from being like almost a horror tension masterpiece, would be a little bit more of a payoff for me.
I mean, yes, I agree with you. And it's frustrating for me because, like, I don't know. I think my movie going process is a little different than your guys's. You know, I don't read a lot of film blogs. I don't, I even go out of my way like not to watch trailers and stuff unless they're put in front of me, when I go to the movies. So like I guess a lot of my expectation comes from the trailers. And as much as I try to set that aside, it's hard when it's marketed that way not to sort of judge it through that lens, right? And the question almost becomes like, did they think that this movie was so boring that they had to frame it that way to get people to come see it? And if that's the case, is that true? I'm not saying I didn't like this movie at all. There were definitely some components that I did like. And I mentioned a couple of them earlier. There are some cool things that are done with tension. But Jim, to your point, I know I'm rambling, but there's a reason, I promise. I felt like going through the whole movie, I'm like, okay, if there's a payoff at the end, like it's going to be worth it. Like all my frustrations, this whole stupid like dream thing with the kid getting sick. Is he sick? Is he not sick? Whatever. Who cares? Like we're going to get a supernatural creature at the end who's like spewing this plague everywhere or like something crazy happens. And no, it's just two families like being people and there's a plague. Like there's just so much buildup. And I feel like I didn't get that. I don't know. I just didn't get that release from it. And like ambiguous endings can be cool. But like at the same time, if you're not going to have some kind of payoff, then I almost think it makes it worse in a way. Like, did the kid die or not? I assume so, but we've seen so much back and forth. Is it a nightmare? Is it not a nightmare? Is it real? Is it not real? You just find yourself really trying to like parse, like, did he get sick and they killed him like they did with the grandpa? Was he just having a nightmare and, mom and dad have blood on them because of what they just had to do with Will and his family? Like, I don't know. It was just very frustrating.
Here's what I'll say. One of the things the movie I think was good. Some people will fault the movie for it. There was no background for these characters whatsoever. The movie jumps you right in. It's a multiracial family. You don't know if oh God, I can't think of the lead actor's name again all of a sudden.
Joel Edgerton.
Joel Edgerton. You don't know if they're like they married late. What is the kid a troubled kid? Like, or has he been like did this plague thing happen like this year, or have they been living out there for 5 years? None of that is even, the movie doesn't even try to answer those questions. And for me, I'm okay with that. I don't need it all laid out for me and, kind of watered down with exposition about the family. The other thing is, this movie has balls because of that one scene with the fleeing, mother and kid, and Joel Edgerton having to take action and shoot them both, and that if you didn't have your heart in your throat in that scene, then you're just, I don't know, man. I don't know what to say, because I think that was one of the most harrowing scenes I've seen in movies. And it's like, are they really going to go there? Is he going to do that in this movie? And he did.
And there's a bit of a pause before he does too. Like that was the big edge of the seat moment for me. Like, it's not like some of these movies would get away with everything happening like a blur and happening extremely quickly. And they're like, obviously when things escalate here, they escalate quickly, but there's a pause as he gets a bead on her and she's running through the woods where you kind of think like, maybe she's going to get away. Or maybe he's going to shoot her. Nah, he's not going to shoot her. I bet he's going to shoot her. Like it doesn't take forever, but it's long enough to let you kind of vacillate a little bit on those things. That's cool. I love that this movie got to do a lot of show and didn't have to do a lot of tell. It didn't have to do a lot of big expositional drops. Like, it was able to, like, some of that stuff that you mentioned, like, where did the plague originate? It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the story. We need to know what's happening specifically to these characters in this particular moment. And it does leave you to ask more questions, and I don't think that's a bad thing. One of the things a friend and I were talking about afterwards was, is it possible that this isn't the first time that they've had to kill someone? I mean, they were ready to go. They knew what to do. They had the guns ready. They were, and they didn't have to debate a lot about, like, are we going to kill someone? They've probably had to defend themselves in the past. We don't have to see that.
Well, we know that. Well, we don't know if they killed anybody in defense. We know they killed the father at the beginning.
Right, but I mean, before that, like it's very possible, not exactly this thing has played out before, but it's almost like this world has kind of created this, again, this like creeping inevitability, which I think is almost as insidious as the Black Plague, like the plague that's sweeping this world, that's slowly killing everybody, what have you. Just this despair and this need to, like, well, I'm going to have to protect me at the cost of anyone that I come across. I think that's just as insidious. And I think that plays out. There's this scene where we see this creepy Bruegel painting, like with like all of the, like it basically the depiction of the Black Death and just like all the terrible things happening on it. And that was almost like a really solid metaphor for this film, and just kind of why I think it was so effective at telling what it did. But again, I don't want to say, like, my absolute love and joy of this film comes with that huge asterisk of, like, I totally get that this is not a film for every single person, and I don't think that it takes anyone away if they had problems with either the pacing or with the direction or with the story. I think that there are extremely narrow focused films. This is one of them. So the things that I absolutely enjoy, I get why someone would not like it. There's films where I'm like, why the fuck don't other people like this? Like, like if you don't like Moonlight, you're foolish, going to that. Like, but this is one where it's like, I think that it's okay for it to be divisive, because it's a strong voice telling a very uniquely focused story. And that's okay for me.
This is one that I would watch a series about this show more than I'd watch The Walking Dead. Because to be honest, the zombies in The Walking Dead are the most boring part of that show, by far. Like and it doesn't do as good a job in conveying the desperation of the situation there. I don't think. Over how many hours of TV have we gotten? We still don't have as much. In all of The Walking Dead, except maybe in the first season, which I thought was really compelling. And there's been a few compelling moments here and there, but I don't want to compare this to The Walking Dead because it's a different thing. One's a zombie movie and one's really not.
They're plague zombies, but
here's
the thing. Here's the thing. If you like made this into a TV show, Jim, I think it would suffer from the same fucking problems The Walking Dead does. And that's, how do you have this compelling, like, ratcheting up of tension and people not getting along and groups falling apart? Like, if you can condense that into an hour and a half of like compelling narrative, great. But if you've got to stretch this over like 13 1-hour episodes over 7 seasons, then I would challenge you, like to tell me, like, how is that going to be compelling for 7 seasons of 13-hour episodes?
The same way Lost was for 7 seasons. I mean, they stretched nothing out over like that show. Well, I mean, you could do it. I mean, it's not that hard.
I think that's part of why the actual comparisons between the two feel a little like it's very apples and oranges. I think that while, like, yes, both are dystopian survival stories, I think that one's telling a story for television, one's telling a story in an hour and a half or whatever the runtime was on this. And you're going to have a different story each way. I mean, we could we could pick apart the strengths and the advantages of The Walking Dead. And don't get me started on like the graphic novel and why I think that it does a better job of pacing some of the things out than the show. But I think that at the end of the day, like there's such different entities that the comparisons, like it's really hard for me to apply what works or doesn't work for one to the other fairly, if that makes sense.
We got a great conversation going on in chat, guys. Sorry we can't get to all those.
I know. In fact, we need to wrap as it is, so we're going to keep our plugs incredibly short and brief. But we're going to go ahead and move on to our plug section. So I'll go first, just to help us wrap up here. Cars 3 is coming out this weekend. I haven't seen any of the Cars movies yet, full disclosure. And I mentioned that I try to avoid, trailers and, whatever. But I don't know. People on the Twitters apparently who've seen a test, like an early screening of this film, are just going nuts, saying that this is like the first Cars movie to actually have like a serious, like, gravitas bent to it, and that it's amazing. So I haven't been able to avoid being sullied by those thoughts. But man, like if an animated movie about talking cars can do that, sign me up. All right. So I will probably catch up with Cars 1 and 2 this week in anticipation of that. But get out there, see it. I imagine we may be reviewing it next week since it's such a big ticket item.
Probably pretty fair based on the things coming out.
So get out there and see Cars 3. Jim, what have you got this week?
I got two quick things. Two things have become available. One on Netflix this month is Zodiac, the 2007 movie. So if you've got Netflix, check that out. This is just absolutely probably one of the best true crime procedurals put on film. Maybe one of the best films of all time even. It's got Jake Gyllenhaal, Robert Downey Jr., Mark Ruffalo, Chloe Sevigny. I love that film. It's great. It's on Netflix right now. Also, another one we saw I got to see at South by Southwest. It's a documentary called Mommy, Dead, and Dearest. Is available right now on HBO or HBO Go if you have that. This is a documentary this year, which has the and shocking, but completely real mother-daughter relationship you'll ever see, like on movie. It's only 80 minutes, but it kind of knocked me for a loop as a documentary. It's called Mommy, Dead, and Dearest.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Jim. And Will, close us out.
This has been a hellaciously good week for me. I'm going to just pick one with the idea that I can save the other one for next week in case it's a weaker week. So the one that I want to recommend, while I'm on the subject of extremely narrow focused films that aren't for everybody, but were definitely for me, there is a movie that you can rent right now on Amazon and iTunes. It's not on Netflix yet. And it's called The Lure, Lure. This is a Polish musical about man-eating mermaids. It's a horror film. It's a musical. It's Polish. Those are a lot of things that are not going to work for a lot of people. But for me, this was such a bizarre mashup that worked so very well. It basically takes the story of it takes the Hans Christian Andersen Little Mermaid story, which is close to, but a little different than the the Disney version. And it retells that story, but through the lens of these two mermaids who come to shore and join this like band in this dive bar. It's really, really cool. It gets gory at times. The music is actually pretty legit. And the film has, once the story kicks in, it does some pretty cool things. So it's called The Lure. Not for everybody, but easily it's my favorite Polish mermaid musical horror film.
All right. Well, there you go.
Does it have a Rastafarian talking crab, Will?
There is no Sebastian analog. For good or for ill, there's no Sebastian.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Well, that wraps us up for this week, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. Those of you who jumped into the live chat with us, Sam and Ben and JP, great to see you guys. Mark, thanks for joining us as well. And also thank you to those who are listening on digital tape delay. We appreciate you guys tuning in every week. For those who are new to the show and just finding us, welcome. Guys, we are getting like all kinds of play from that Daddy Hunt episode we did over a year ago. That that episode on YouTube has over 25,000 views, which, considering most of our episodes don't even come close to approaching that, is kind of awesome. So I know we've had new folks come in because of that. So hi, glad you're here. Hello. We will see you all next week. Before we give our final goodbye, Jim, where can people find you online?
I'm on Twitter at JJP Out West, and I'm also on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico.
All right, excellent. And Will, how about you?
So you can find me in 3 places. I'm on Twitter. I tweet every so often about movies there. I'm at Whatever Cove. You can find me on Facebook, where I talk about way too much and share too much. I'm William Lindis there. Feel free to add me. Just send me a message first. And if you'd like to see my reviews, I've seen over 200 films this year already. We've only talked about a few of them here on the show. So if you want to see how I feel about those films, check me out on Letterboxd. Just search for me by name there and see my very random and meaningless star ratings.
All right, there you go. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at iBradPro, or send me a message on Facebook. Say hi, add me as a friend if you like. We can talk movies. Just look for Brad Harris. It's unfortunate that YouTube Live doesn't have the lower third like overlays we used to have with their names and Twitter handles. That's a bummer. What the fuck, Google?
Get with it.
You're free, so I guess we can't complain too much. Anyway, we will see you all next time. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.